The hour of labor has arrived, and the work of another day demands our attention. Worthy Vice President, are we ready to begin?
Worthy Steward, please prepare for our work.
My assistants have placed the Bible on the altar.
And now, worthy Chaplain, as laborers under the great Master of the universe, let us stand and bow our head in prayer.
Do we have a chaplain?
Larry, stand on Larry's chaplain. So you sit right there.
All right, here we go.
Almighty Father, maker of heaven and earth, and giver of all good, we return our heartfelt thanks that we have permitted the camp to meet each other here for work in our glorious cause. Give us patience and wisdom in our counsel as the body, that our work may be good and acceptable in your sight, and that our labors may be blessed with a liberal harvest. And when we are called to lay down our lives on earth, may we enter that paradise, not made with hands, eternal in the heavens, and receive that welcome greeting. Well done, good and faithful service. We beseech you to bless the officers and members of this Grange, and all concerned with the order from the highest to the lowest degree, and grant them prosperity. We ask all in your holy name. Amen.
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 Well done, Sean. Well done.
Thank you, Brother Larry.
Now, Chaplain Larry.
Patrons, I'm about to open the Grange. Please assist with the salutation. Brother Ed, is Brother Ed here? He will show us. Ed, please stand up and show us how to do this.
Oh, what's one of these things?
Yeah. There you go.
Is that the Macarena?
I think it's all right. This is not the chicken dance. This is please assist the salutations. A good patron places faith in God,
Dispenses charity.
nurtures hope, dispenses charity,
Oh, and
and is noted for fidelity.
I like to know.
Well done, brother. Patrons in faith and hope and charity, the fidelity of Grange meeting is now open. Worthy Vice President,
By command of the worthy President, I proclaim this Grange open for promoting the welfare of our country and of mankind, for advancing the interests, elevating the characters, and increasing the influence of all its members, by properly transacting our business and by exemplifying our principles in faith, in hope, in charity, and with fidelity.
thank you, worthy Vice President. So we do have a flag here, so I think we can say pledge allegiance to the flag.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. So, do we have any guests present tonight? I don't see any, okay. So the roll call of officers, reading of the records of the last meeting, should we waive that?
Yes.
Good. Do you have any proposals for membership? Any ideas? Any thoughts? I think the Lions Club, Judy and Joy have joined. Joyce joined from the Lions Club. This is great. I think
And
the
then
Lions.
Michelle.
And Michelle.
Michelle, who said is not with us tonight. Absolutely. So I think Lions Club could be a source of more new members. Which is good because of the symbiotic relationship with the Bristol. So, you know, it was mostly why we're all here, other than have a delicious dinner and get to know each other, which is fun. So if you have any ideas, people in the Lions Club, let me know. But we'll see how it goes. Thank you. So I would like to call on the secretary, Lisa. Could we hear your report?
Sure, yeah, you don't want me to read the minutes, right?
No.
Yeah. I don't have too much to say, just a couple of things. I got a couple of things in the mail, regarding, first of all, the first thing that's coming up on Saturday, July 30th, is the Massachusetts State Grange Extravaganza. There's basically two main parts to it. It's gonna be, I believe, UMass Amherst, I believe. There's two main parts. There's a talent show they're gonna have that day and a baking contest. But they're also going to give tours at the gardens at the Agricultural Learning Center, and they're gonna give you lunch. So I'll just pass this around, you can look, if you wanna sign up, just let me know. And
What's the date?
Saturday, July 30th, and the time is, let's see, the time, looks like basically things, yes, it's the College of Education UMass in Amherst. It looks like things start around 10 and they wind up somewhere after last thing. It says to 2, right, but something's actually happening at 2, which is the
Oh,
extra,
okay,
which is
the
a talent show.
show is
Yeah,
at 2.
so, yeah, so it's probably 2:30 or whatever it ends, so it's about 4.5 hours or something.
Yeah, that should be very interesting.
Yeah, so anyway, that's that, and then I also got, they're really preparing for the 150th anniversary of the State Grange, because I already got the invitation, and just be thinking about, I guess, if anybody wants to go to the Massachusetts State Grange, in Plymouth this year, the state session is in Plymouth, and the deadline for reservations is October 7th. And the dates for the state session are, it's the end of October, hold on.
The 27th to 29th.
It's the, yeah, something like that, it's, yeah, October 27th to the 30th, and they're in Plymouth. George told me at the meeting, this Pomona meeting I went to, that it's a very, like, private, like, hotel, and
It's
it's,
1620 hotel.
yeah, and so, like, you can't, you have to call the hotel and tell them, like, you're with the Grange.
So it's what he's trying to avoid is whenever you call to get a reservation, like which should happen in Fort Devens, you call and they say we don't have any rooms.
Right, they'll tell you, right,
There's plenty of rooms. If you just have to get one of the rooms that has been saved.
for the Grange.
So that's what I ran into last year, is I said, you've got to have rooms, no. So the magic words are, and then you get a $25 a day off that's subsidized. The other thing about it is when it comes to the extravaganza, they say they're gonna show you the gardens. The reason is the State Grange for 2 years gave a big endowment towards it. I don't know if they gave 30,000 2 years ago and 10,000 last year to develop this agricultural thing at the University of Ames. And so when they say you want to see the gardens, it's to see where our money's been spent.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. That's, it was a hunk of money.
So I'll send this around too. It looks very interesting, this State Grange. They're gonna have a lot of things at this special year, this 150th celebration, so I'll pass this around too. So just be thinking about it. You have till October 7th.
And I would point out, I mean, it's relatively nearby, so you don't have to spend a fortune
Right.
getting a hotel room there.
You don't? No. You can just go for the day. I might do that.
I did, I went to it, it was really interesting, the whole thing
Yeah,
was fun.
it's very interesting. I went for one day last year. I could only do one day, and actually it is very interesting. I mean, I didn't realize how much there was to it until I went, you know.
Yeah, and these people, the high ups, obviously, they're very into it, so that's nice.
They
to
really
see.
are. The whole dance they do at the beginning, and it's this whole choreographed thing.
Yeah, back and forth, up
The
and down.
rose trail.
I couldn't believe
Masons,
that.
I think the Masons do that too.
Yeah, it's really pretty.
Yes.
The only other thing I just want to mention, Bill, is next month I'm going to be doing a complete program. I think I mentioned this to some people already. The state lecturer, Kristen Paulson, is that her name?
Exactly.
Yeah, Kristen Paulson. She's going to be coming here with her husband to judge this complete program that I'm doing. And I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm going to be doing this program. This will be like the lecturer program next month. And I just want to read the elements that I have to have in this program, just so when it happens, you guys know why I'm doing certain things. Yeah, it's, there's 5 things, and they actually ask for these elements, they call the prime elements, and each thing begins with a P-R-I-M-E. The first one is participation, so I have to involve the other members of my Grange. R, recreation, they call it, so you have to have some sort of humor to your program, a little bit of humor. I is inspiration, so you have to have some sort of uplifting poem, story, speaker, quotes, whatever. M, I have to have some sort of music in this program. And E is for education, which I have to have factual or informative material. So I've given a lot of thought to it. It's going to be an old-fashioned radio show, and it's going to be a script that's actually a Grange mystery, but it's presented in the form of a radio show. So everyone will be getting a script, and I ask for your help and participation in this, and it should be fun. It's meant to be fun, and it's not going to be any longer than like 20 minutes. It has to be a certain amount of time, but it's not going to be any longer than 20
Oh, that
minutes.
sounds like fun.
Yeah, and you'll learn something, because I've been doing a lot of research. If I just give you like a little hint into what sort of what it's about, it's actually, I've been researching the history of music in the Grange, so it's been very interesting for me.
I was
Yes.
hoping to be a murder mystery.
Well, and no murder, but there's still a mystery. So thank you, so yeah, that's gonna be great.
Will we need a rehearsal, say, an hour before the
Nope,
event?
you'll have very little to do. I'll just hand people, if you can read, most people are just gonna be like singing the song that I'm gonna be sort of showing, and then, and just saying like a couple little sentences, which is nothing. So, yeah, no, you won't hear it.
I'm listening to you sing here, it could be some.
You know something, Ed, I'm
June
gonna
20th,
practice.
June 20th, yes. Please, thank you.
Wise guy.
Yeah, I am gonna just ask Michael for his assistance too.
Great.
But I'm gonna give him the music beforehand, so he has a chance to look at it.
Yeah, that'd be a good thing.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
And I think that's it.
Once again, you're bringing another
That was
wonderful
weekend.
program.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll be coming back, so
Yeah,
we'll be rolling in late.
that's on, in June.
June 20, next meeting, next meeting.
So, someone said that we're going back to the hall.
For July
The
11th.
loggia, yeah, we could go back to the loggia if you want.
Yeah. But can we get in with the kitchen and all that stuff?
You need to ask Joan about that.
I asked Joan, we can use the bathrooms, we can get the tables and chairs out. So, it's just using the summer weather, and then, because you never know when it's permanently gonna be able, we could be back here in September and October, etc. I'll let the pastor know. Maybe like the Sunday, the day before on the Sunday, so that Kim
Yeah.
doesn't have to set this up. But yeah, I was worried about not being able to access water.
Well, it's mighty nice here. You know, I mean, we're going back to the hall inevitably anyway, right?
Right,
So,
but it's that outside weather, you can't beat it. Even if it rains, we can be out in another,
July,
Okay.
for 1 month.
and possibly till August.
Okay.
August and this can be very hot.
Yeah. Okay, well, that sounds like a
But usually it's
plan.
cool when
And
So next month is here, Bill? I just.
Next month is here, 100%.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so
So is any member sick or in distress? Or what, Lynn?
finances?
Or finance, yeah, I was gonna get to it, but finance.
Oh, usually
now.
the chart.
Yeah, you're right.
thing. Okay, I have to hand something out. Now, this is the full report. I sent this in the email, but there's a real one. George Thomas pointed out last month that I was less than totally candid about items of people what you have, so I immediately realized where he's coming from. So I'm providing each group of people, one of these. I think I have 12 copies. So, you two guys, you here.
The three of us can.
But I think, okay, so here's this. Now, what it is, it's, what I'm going to do going forward is have,
Oh, I was gonna.
let's see,
I have two.
no, you have to pass that on.
Okay, thank you.
You may have to.
I do have two.
Okay, hand this over to
Here, you can.
This is what I'm putting in my minutes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Does somebody else need one? Okay, so how this is set up is, it starts, it's the period of expenses, bills that I paid as of the day of the last Grange meeting because I pay bills on that day. So I don't include today in this thing because I pay bills today. So if you look at the top page, and then the balance sheets afterwards, you look at the top page, at the end of last month, we had
That's the in July.
$32.10. So you can see the monies that came in was $1,000. We had two receipts from the thrift store, $21.51 and $26.41. And you can see the expenses that we incurred. Now, the thing that George pointed out was because we're a kind of a Grange by definition, you as a body have to approve these expenses. And that's where they, even though the exec board sees things and stuff like that, and I let you know that everything's hunky-dory, that doesn't cut mustard. The state, the board, you have to look at this first page and agree to vote that these expenses are reasonable. You can do that in 1 second. Then on page 2, the other piece of information I give you by and large is I tell you where our cash is. And as of today, our total cash is $11,337, including the money market. And our goal is to keep it at $10,000. So I'm going to try to get back to, giving the state more than $200 a month. We've been giving it $600. And you can see that our net income over expense is almost $4,000 since October 1st.
That's a good one.
So, does somebody want to agree to vote that these are acceptable financials?
Make a motion.
Yes. So moved. Second.
Third.
Okay, how many, and how many vote with the sign of the order?
Well, we signed the order.
Okay.
Well done.
And there's no questions. Oh, then also, other thing is we have a bill that's coming from the insurance company. It's for the property, and it's for $749, I'm gonna pay it in soon.
$749?
Yeah, it's not the liability, it's the fire insurance, $749. So,
Yeah, gotta do it. Well, so how much is the liability? Let's see, I can tell you the answer, it's in the bigger financials. That's all right.
But if this is what it is, and I'm gonna give this to Worthy Secretary, this is the entire insurance policy.
Good, well done.
Here's the insurance policy.
When you say we pay it in installments, is that quarterly or?
They charge you like $10 each one, so I just pay them annually with $749. Because they have to pay the big insurance company in total, so that's why only if you don't have any money do you pay quarterly, because you have a fee. But I was gonna try to catch up with our payments to the Grange, but I'm gonna wait till because the idea is, we're looking at wanting to insulate the building in the fall. So if I just keep for a while paying minimums, which is $200 versus $600, we could have by August, September, enough money to insulate that attic.
Good. Okay, well, that'll be, well.
How much do we owe the Grange per year?
What do you mean, owe them? No, we took a like $22,000 loan for that bathroom, and so we're down to like $13,000. Because we're trying to pay it off for 2.5 years at a rate of $600. But the last 3 months, I've only been doing $200 because I didn't want to spend too much money. But as soon as we get that $13,000 paid off, we'll be all free.
Do you want these papers back?
You can hand them back, it's not bad.
Am I supposed to keep this one?
Yeah, it's an insurance policy.
Okay, all right, keep it. Yeah,
That's a good
give
thing.
these.
Well, before we get to the lecture evening, I'd like to say thanks to Ernie for stepping in for my master role. Yeah, the meeting went very well.
You did.
Judy and Joyce just came in.
Very nice.
And Michelle as well, and there was one other too, right?
Yes, Jeanette, Benny Holmberg's daughter.
Daughter-in-law.
Isn't that
Daughter-in-law or daughter?
Well, it's her daughter.
Daughter, right, married to Ty, right,
Yeah.
it's her daughter.
So she got the invitation for tonight and all that.
She did, yes, I have her email, yep.
Yeah,
Sure,
Might be on
yeah,
top if you
let me
want.
check my list to make sure I got it.
Well, yeah, and I realized, I don't know how it happened, honestly, I really tried to, like, I don't know who gave me your email, but I tried to get everything right, but
That's okay.
she had a 0 that wasn't in her email, so she wasn't getting my email, so if anybody's not getting my email, please tell me, because there might be some little mistake. Oh, this actually, can I just tell a little story?
Sure.
Because this is how easy mistakes can happen. My sister got a piece of mail, she takes care of my mom, she got a piece of mail and said, "Oh, Suzanne, I'm so sorry about the passing of your mother," and blah, blah. Well, come to find out, long story short, the funeral home submitted what they thought was someone's social security number, and it was off by one number, it was my mother's. So her pension, her health insurance, and everything canceled, yes, because she was dead.
It's hard to
So
come
it
back.
was really hard for my sister, she had to make, it was so much work to try to get it, so.
Yes.
I know.
So if something like that ever happens, think about, maybe it could just be like a number thing, like with her, because it was just, I just didn't have that one number, and I apologize for that, but I don't know how that happened. I really try to be careful. Anyway, I'm glad we had it fixed, so if anyone's not getting the emails, please come see me, because I send everybody emails,
Yeah.
okay?
I'll have to look.
But the things that we pass around, get emailed to us, is that possible? You know,
From the treasury report.
not, yeah, the stuff of the events that's coming up. You know, all the,
Like this, you mean?
Yeah.
yeah, those, you know, the things about the meeting.
Do you have a way to scan them?
Um, Yeah, I guess I could try, yeah, so because you're interested in this, or is it the state session one? Or
You
both?
know, it
Yeah.
just,
Yeah, we
we
can
can't
do that,
read them
yeah.
fast here.
Right, I know what you're saying, right, I get it.
If we could
I'll
just-
try, and also I might even be getting some, state news that might be included in that too, so I'll take a look and see.
I get various Grange news.
You do,
So
okay.
I can look at that too.
Yeah, sure,
All right.
but I will try, I don't, my husband might have a scanner on his, I don't have, but I'll see what I can do, okay?
All right.
You know, I scan all the time. Give me what you need to scan, and I'll send it to you. I have a color scanner.
Okay, and then I can just share it with everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
I'll-
great,
I'll
good,
send it.
if you can scan that,
Oh, that's great.
So everyone will get that soon, after she scans it and sends it
That's
to
a
me.
great idea.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mike, for bringing that up.
yeah. It is hard to take it
So,
on.
are there any suggestions for the good of the order? Hearing none, okay. So, it's a great pleasure to introduce the lecturer of the 196 Grange, Priscilla Marquis Olson. So Priscilla has prepared, as usual, a very good program for us, and over to you. Let's give her a round of applause.
Okay, Ernie, you all set? Ed, you wanna come up?
Sure.
The mic, was the mic up here?
I have to listen to it.
Please.
Ernie says if we just leave it alone. Ernie says if we just leave it alone and left it right there.
I know, but I want you to, well, okay, then you can put it on.
Sure.
Okay. You can hold it and put it on. I'll take it. I'll introduce you. I don't want to stand behind this lectern now. Okay. Come here, Ed.
Anybody want some more water?
Anything strong?
Soon, that's later.
Okay. You guys okay? Welcome to Easton Grange. Today is Monday, May 23rd, 2022, and we are all assembled here at the Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. We will have our next meeting next month, same time, 6 o'clock for supper, delicious meal, and the program at 7. So please come and join us on the third Monday of June for an interesting program. But tonight we have a really very intriguing program because I'm introducing Ed Hams. Now most of you know him as our town historian with Hazel Varela. But maybe some of you don't know that Ed is the son of a duck and chicken farmer. And so he grew up on a farm here in Easton. Was that Southeastern?
It was actually Northeastern.
Northeastern. And so we're going to hear about life growing up on a farm and other interesting facts and information from Ed. So welcome, Ed. Thank you for being a member of our Grange as well as our speaker tonight.
No, I just want you to put it right there. Beautiful, thank you. Can you hear me, Ernie? Okay. So, besides being a noble chicken farmer, I was a teacher, so you're going to get kind of the teacher version of growing up in Easton. And the reason for that is that I figured we should make this a big extravaganza. And there'll be more puns coming up. Let's start with a history of chickens, okay? About 8,000 years ago, chickens were domesticated in Southeast Asia, in Thailand, Indonesia, in that area. And as the domesticated chicken wended its way westward, they ran into a whole bunch of other chicken prototypes. They're called jungle fowl. So the red jungle fowl of Southeast Asia met the Indian jungle fowl, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, until around about 50 AD, the chicken made it all the way to England. Okay? And it says right here under History of Chickens, I should get rid of the #1 myth that people have. You don't have to have a rooster in order to have eggs. We don't like to spread that around too much for us roosters, but with chickens they can dispense with the guy. I would like to also talk a little bit about the types of chickens. And there were a whole bunch of different kinds of just birds running around in 18th and early 19th century America. There wasn't really an emphasis on different breeds, except in places like Japan, where chickens with big long feathers in their tails were shown in display, and in China, where there were also show chickens. But chickens for food were known as dunghill fowl, which meant that the farmers just let them run around and take care of themselves. Not a good way to get as many eggs as you could from the chicken, but it worked out, all right? But in the 19th century, thanks to people like Frederick Lothrop Ames, there was a movement towards developing different breeds. And we all know about the Guernsey cattle from Langwater, but there were also attempts to breed different kinds of dogs. Most of the breeds of dogs we know today are from the 19th century, not much before that. And it's the same with chickens. Chickens essentially fall into two categories. They're either egg-layer chickens or they're meat chickens. And there are dual-purpose chickens for small farms. Okay. Once you get past the two types of job-related chickens, you have two more subdivisions: cold-hardy chickens and warm-weather chickens. And I probably should have brought pictures of chickens, but if you've been seeing the previews for the next Jurassic Park movie, that's what a chicken looks like without the feathers. Okay. And a matter of fact, having 3 chickens at home, they sometimes give me the look like, yeah, don't turn your back, which will be velociraptors again soon. So, when it comes to cold hardy breeds, they're the ones we're most familiar with here in New England. Chickens that are cold hardy tend to be chickens that have darker feathers and fluffier feathers to keep themselves warm. And with the darker feathers comes the fact that they lay brown eggs. One of the big questions people always have is, what's better, brown eggs or white eggs? Nutritionally, they're about the same. In general, brown eggs tend to be a little larger. Brown eggs come from bigger hens, which means they grow more slowly, which to the farmer is a disadvantage, because you want your chicken to grow up and start laying eggs as quickly as possible. But since they're cold hardy and located right here in New England, a brown egg is likely to be, from the supermarket, is likely to be much more fresh than a white egg. Okay? Although there are some white egg growers in Massachusetts. The other kind of chicken is the warm weather chicken. The most famous one is called Leghorn. It's named after a town in Italy. It's a little bit smaller than the chickens we're used to around here. Most of them are white, although they do come in other colors. And they're champion egg layers. They as a breed, lay about 40 or 50 more eggs a year than the brown egg layers. And they grow up faster. The eggs are a little bit smaller, and the birds are crazy. So if you're a farmer, you don't like them very much because you'll walk into a pen and they'll all run around, and some of them will hit themselves against the wall or hurt themselves. Some of them will attack you. So they're not as nice as the cold hardy breeds. Now I have 3 cold hardy breeds at home. One's, and my oldest chicken is a Moran, and it comes from a small town on the coast of France. It sort of looks like a Plymouth Rock, the chicken that's gray and white and black. But the pattern is a little bit mixed up, so they're called cuckoo Morans. Her personality is a little cuckoo as well. She's my boss chicken, because one myth about chickens is true. They do have a pecking order, and she's the boss. Okay? And she's kind of mean, actually. She's a suspect in the great rooster murder case in my family. I had a rooster, and he disappeared. Well, not disappeared. He showed up dead one morning. So we don't know to this day whether he was murdered by his wives, who didn't like getting jumped on all the time. And he didn't need Viagra. He was ready to go at all times. Or he could have been killed by a disgruntled neighbor who snuck in at night and offed him. I kind of suggested that to many neighbors because, boy, he could crow. And then finally, he may have been protecting the flock by scaring off some kind of predator, and he jumped the wrong way, hit his head, and broke his neck. But at any rate, we have a murder mystery that hasn't been solved, one of Easton's great murder mysteries. My other chicken is what's known as a partridge rock, and it's actually related to the Plymouth Rock chicken. The Plymouth Rock chicken, obviously, is named for Plymouth Rock. It was developed here in Massachusetts about 1869, and has been, it was at one time the #1 egg-laying chicken in the country. It's been sort of replaced, and we'll talk about that in a while. 1849, excuse me, I'm sorry about that. The other chicken, which I don't have, is Rhode Island Red. And that one was invented in 1854. Okay, or when in 1854. Now the Rhode Island Red is the state bird of Rhode Island. There's one other state that has a chicken as its state bird. Does anybody know what it is?
North Carolina.
North Carolina wanted to switch to a chicken, but they didn't. Nope. One more guess.
South Carolina.
Iowa.
Iowa has many chicken breeds, but, and as a matter of fact, they have a chicken breed called the Ames breed.
No.
Yeah, it's not that wonderful. It comes from Ames, Iowa, the University of Iowa, and just to take the charm off of it, the #1 weaponized version of anthrax is also named the Ames version.
Vicious combination. You are vicious.
So,
And give us a hint about the
New
state.
Jersey.
oh, you're getting warm. It's Delaware. The Blue Hens of Delaware. There actually is a blue hen.
That's their football team's nickname.
It is there, yes, which
The hens.
makes you wonder why you name a football team after chickens, but that's okay. It doesn't strike me as, go out there and
Well, it's farm country.
yeah,
So, it's different.
bull, you could be a bull.
Yeah.
So my other chicken, my friend Buddy, is my youngest chicken. She's golden colored and she's very friendly. I want to point out, chickens have personalities. That's what makes them kind of special. Chickens and ducks are probably the first flighted birds that ever evolved. They go back at least 71 million years, and so they've had a lot of time to think about things and develop a personality. Buddy, my Orpington, will follow me around. She'll, jump up to be fed out of my hand and all of those things. The other guys are a little more standoffish.
This is in your house, Ed?
Hopefully outside.
In a coop?
Not in my house, no. We have a chicken shed made by the Amish and imported to Massachusetts.
Okay, so the shed behind your house?
Yes,
Okay, cool.
yeah.
Do they all lay eggs or breed?
No, actually, True lay eggs, and the cuckoo Moran has retired. Okay. In theory, chickens are supposed to lay all their eggs in 1 year, and then maybe you're going to get some eggs later on. Later on. What usually happens is you get a big flush of eggs the first year, and then when winter comes along, the days get shorter, and that causes chickens to shut off their egg production. Now, you can prevent that by hanging a light bulb and making a day 12 hours long. But that just makes the chicken lay all of its eggs faster. So what I've done is just let the chickens lay an egg when they feel like it. And my middle girl, who's the other one that's laying, is 5 years old now, and she's still laying eggs. Not as many as she used to, but I get eggs. For a backyard person, 3 chickens is more than enough, because a chicken, when they're in the business of laying eggs, will lay an egg about every 25 hours. It builds up pretty quickly.
Wow.
So before the Civil War, eggs were the #1 reason to raise chickens. And many of you here may have heard the saying, "You're no spring chicken." And that's true for most of you, because spring chickens are actually boys. Just like with any other animal, about 50% of all the chickens that are hatched are boys, and the other half are girls. So what you would do if you were a farmer, you'd hatch out your chicken, keep the girls to lay eggs, and then you'd raise up the boys to be spring chickens. And it would take about 20 weeks for a chicken to go from egg to table. Okay. Now it takes about 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So it's not a great life to be a chicken.
No.
All right. Backyard chicken's a different thing. There's many people like me have chickens for pets. Some do have them in the house with diapers.
Wow.
Just letting you know. For the most part, people didn't eat chicken except on a special occasion. You get your spring chickens in the spring, and they were broiler size, the smaller chickens. If you wanted to get a roaster chicken, what you would do is, as my mother used to say about bulls, remove their opinion and turn them into capons. They would bulk up, and you'd get a larger chicken that way. For the rest of the year, you were stuck with last year's hens, and they were called fowl. That's F-O-W-L, but in reality, F-O-U-L probably was much like what they were. They were pretty tough, and they would make a wonderful stew. So the chicken business wasn't that great. What did people eat instead? They ate ducks. Ducks are wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay? they have a lot more fat, and in the days before, nutrition and nutrition labels and too many doctors. The fatty part of a duck is what gives it taste, so it's delicious. Ducks grew up faster than chickens, so that you could turn them into a profit much more quickly. They were healthier. As we may have heard recently, ducks are the #1 carrier of avian flu. And they're happy to carry it to you because they don't get sick with it, or much of anything else. They've been around 71 million years, they've seen it all. Okay, so they don't get sick. The poultry inspectors in Massachusetts don't inspect ducks because they don't get sick. They won't look at them. When I was at the NRT raising chickens there, you know, our hens all had to have shots. The ducks, yeah, okay, leave over there, leave them alone. They will, nothing will ever happen to them. And it was true until they got eaten by foxes. But, it can happen to anybody. So fat, healthy, grow up fast, and they could be pastured much more easily than chickens. You could put them out in the field and they would do better than chickens. Things began to change when a man named James Rankin came to Easton. Okay? And James Rankin, believe it or not, and I never believed this, but I've done the research on it, James Rankin is really the father of the modern poultry industry. The dinner that you had tonight, you can thank James Rankin for, because he came to Easton and at his farm, he perfected the modern poultry industry. He was trying to get more ducks, but it ended up chickens. So at one point, the golf course had about 20,000 ducks at a time and maybe 10,000 chickens. But he said he made the most money off of his chickens. So what happened? Well, he decided the best thing was to get rid of hens. Let them lay the eggs and then, you know, back to work. One of the problems with chickens is once they get a bunch of eggs in the nest, they stop laying altogether. It's called going broody. So he would just take all the eggs, and he invented an incubator to hatch the eggs. That was a pretty important technological innovation. He wasn't the first guy to think of the idea. As a matter of fact, there's evidence the ancient Egyptians tried to have incubators. But the problem is you have to regulate both the temperature and the humidity, and you have to turn the eggs. And he invented the Monarch incubator that could take about 600 chicken eggs or about 450 duck eggs and get about 90 to 95% hatching. So all of a sudden, he had a lot of baby chickens. Never thinking that far ahead, he said, wait a second, Mom is supposed to sit on those, but Mom's not here anymore. So he also had to invent something called the Brooder House, which was a long, skinny shed that regulated, it sort of regulated its own temperature. At one end was steam pipes that made a nice warm spot for little baby chicks to go. And then as they got further away, they could adjust their heat. It could be cool at one end and hot at the other. And there were a number of those sheds at the old golf course for both chickens and for the ducks.
Ed, can you just repeat the last name of this gentleman?
Rankin, R-A-N-K-I-N, James.
Thank you.
He came from Scotland.
And you need to tell people which golf course.
Oh yeah, it's Easton Country Club, which passed through a number of hands. He was sort of one of the middle owners, and the most recent owner, and still owns the golf course, is the Lombardi family. So many of you may know them. So he invented he invented the incubator. He invented the brooder. He also realized that the best way to get healthy chickens and healthy ducks is to feed them good food. You know, don't let them just out and forage around. Cook up some vegetables, feed them vegetables and grain every day, and they would grow up faster and be healthier and lay more eggs. Okay. Rankin was a real 19th century salesman. So if you actually go to a thing like Google Books, you can still download 6 or 8 of his books about how wonderful his incubator is and how to raise ducks and poultry. That was a real good innovation. He made a lot of money, and when he retired in 1908, ducks still outnumber chickens here in Easton. We even had a restaurant that instead of serving a chicken dinner like we had tonight, would have a duck dinner, and there was a duck sandwich, and there was duck salad, and everything was still ducks into the 20th century. But things were slowly changing. And in 1924, a man named Howard A. Richards founded Harco Orchards and Poultry Farm. And this is sort of where my family comes into the business. This was based in Southeastern, although the main farm where the working chickens were was actually just over the line in Norton, where Blueview Nursery is today. And if you go to Blueview, there's one big house in back. That's the chicken house. The chicken business was much different than it is now in those days. And the chickens, at least at Harco, had a lot of room to walk around when they were on the job. And after they retired, because they were very special chickens, they came to Southeastern and had a couple more years off the job. And I'll explain why in a few minutes. Okay. So once you had the incubator and the brooder, then the trick became producing a chicken that would lay more and more eggs, because money was in the egg business. Howard A. Richards decided he would take 2 species of cold weather chicken, the Rhode Island Red and the Plymouth Rock, and try to increase their production. And he was very successful in doing that, to the point where each of them would be entered in competitions all over the country and produced about 250 eggs a year. Okay. These were the days when there was no knowledge of modern genetics. You know, the Leghorn Mendel had done his experiments with peas, which some people had heard of. So there was a general idea, if you crossed this with that, you might get something. But nobody knew the mechanics of it, how would it actually work. And that's where my dad came in. My dad went to Stockbridge, where that flower garden is now located. That Stockbridge is the name of UMass's agricultural school. Many of you probably don't know that UMass is a land-grant college. We don't think of Massachusetts as, like, you know, the University of Iowa, which is, oh yeah, land-grant college. Land-grant means it was paid for by government funds from the sale of public lands. And that's how UMass got started. So my dad was there, and he was taking a general farm husbandry class back in the 1930s when he was stepped on by a draft horse and decided to specialize in poultry, which if you get stepped on doesn't hurt quite as much. So when he graduated in about 1936, he was wandering around taking jobs down on the Cape at duck farms. One way you could raise ducks, and one of the reasons it was popular around here is you use the shore and the beach and all of this sort of stuff. So he started down there at Sturtevant's, I think it was. And then in 1938, he got a job at Harco, and he worked with a man named Eddie Milano. And between the two of them, they produced this chicken that, you know, that did so many eggs. Then, what they discovered was that if you took a Rhode Island Red rooster and a Plymouth Rock hen and introduced them to each other over candlelight and dinner.
Chicken dinner.
Yeah, chicken dinner. Chickens will do that, by the way. Chickens will eat other chickens. Yeah, it's not a good thing, but it's true. What would end up is you get a chick that first of all would lay over 300 eggs a year instead of 250. And every boy chicken had a little black dot on the top of his head, so that you could tell right away he was a boy. which was not good for boy chickens. Because if you weren't going to sell them as broilers, then sadly they were euthanized.
Chicken shelters, right?
What?
The chicken shelter, right?
Yeah, you can do that.
Do you have a chicken shelter?
Yes.
Oh, God, what's that like?
My dad knew, and I know how to do this too. I try not to think about it, but you grab a chicken by its feet, put its head on the ground, step on the head and pull.
Ooh.
Okay, and then the chicken wanders around for a while, you're not really sure it's dead, it's kind of embarrassing. And yes, there was a chicken once who had his head chopped off and still lived.
Yeah.
That's another great American story of the 1930s, but it's true, there's pictures.
Wow.
So no, euthanized meant, in the best of circumstances, put in a container with carbon dioxide and smothered. There's no way around it, it wasn't good. Although, otherwise you'd live 10 more weeks and turn into a broiler chicken. The life of a boy chicken was not good. But the hens would go on to work in these competitions, and the very best of them got to retire. So after a couple of years, or after a year of heavy laying, they would end up in South Easton in a big chicken house. And they were saved because they were of particular value genetically. Now, they didn't know what the genes were, but they knew that this particular chicken produced a lot of eggs, so they would hold on to her. And they'd hold on to some of the roosters that crossed and made the same thing happen. And then, when the chickens got a little bit older and they weren't laying at all anymore, they would get to go out across the street in South Easton, and this is where we lived, on 345 Bay Road. It's a housing development now. So 345 Bay Road, across the street, there were just big open houses, and the chickens, you'd open the gates up in the daytime, the chickens would go wander around, and my very first job was to, along with our German Shepherd, who was much better trained than me, chase the chickens into the house so that they wouldn't get eaten by foxes at night. Okay? And then ultimately, sadly, soup called, and these chickens would leave. These chickens were very valuable. In the 1960s, in 1965, the golden class, the class that could roar. I was a class behind them, so I had feelings. But the class of 1965 had a person who stole some of our chickens and gave them X-Lax and put them in his father's car. His father was the principal.
Oh, gee.
Okay. So little did the class of 1965 knew that these chickens were worth $40 a piece, and they had to make good out of the class treasury for the chickens who no longer could be used for laying eggs.
That was Julia Cruz's son, right?
Yes, that was Julia Cruz's son. We were trying to kind of keep that. Yes, Mr. Cruz's son.
So back then they were worth $40 each.
At then, yeah, that's 1965.
That was a long time ago, so they were,
Yes.
$100.
Yeah, definitely over $100. Although it's actually easier to do this nowadays because, with DNA analysis, you kind of know what's a good chicken and what's not a good chicken. So my dad worked with a lot of people, some of whom you may know. There was this guy named Lee Williams, who was a very proud member of the Harco Orchards team. And he, because he was relatively well educated for a high school kid, got to help my dad and his assistant, Wally Bullock, keep track of the chickens. How do you know a chicken lays a lot of eggs? Well, you set up a trap, and the chicken goes into the nest, and the nest closes. She lays her eggs, and she has to be let out of the thing. You mark down the number on her leg that she laid an egg today, et cetera, et cetera. You could weigh the egg and do a whole bunch of other things. So that's how Lee got started. He got paid 75 cents an hour, which was big money in those days. I didn't get paid at all, actually. Dad said you're gonna go out and close those chicken houses out, and I did. Yes,
No.
okay. So, there were other people, that are well remembered, Eddie Rogers, Cliff Rideout, Ed Leonard, Inky Williams, and Wally Bullock were some of the ones I remember. These are all important people to me when I was growing up because they were very, very skilled workers. You know, they were, yeah, they were chicken farmers, but they knew what they were doing. And when Harco finally closed, most of these guys got very, very good jobs. Mr. Leonard ended up as the head of maintenance at Wheaton College. Eddie Rogers was the person in charge of the building and grounds at Southeastern Regional. And he hired my dad, who my dad became the head night custodian because he was one of the older members of this team. And probably, and I wish I remembered his name, but you may have seen movies about prisoners of war. And here in Massachusetts, we had a prisoner of war camp just down the road from Easton in Norton and Foxborough, I think it was. And rather than have these guys sit around, you know, there was very little chance of one German guy starting a war. So a lot of these guys were let out on parole. And Harco hired a German prisoner of war to work as a poultryman. And after the war was over, he stayed in the United States. There was no reason for him to go home. He didn't have a fair family. And so he stayed for many, many years and worked at the farm. The average work week at that time was 54 hours. So that's a little bit more than the 14-hour day, but that's typical of farm work. I was told by my parents that, you know, the reason you're getting clothes for Christmas is we're poor. You know, no toys for you, we're poor. Well, the 1950 census just came out. My dad is listed as poultry expert, and he was making a decent salary compared to my grandfather, who was a salesman, you know, white collar guy. So you could make a good living at the chicken business. In 1964, a company called Arbor Acres bought Harco. We're almost done here, folks. But Harco. Arbor Acres was run by the Rockefeller family, and what they were trying to do was develop all sorts of agriculture that they could send overseas to help provide food in international development. So obviously egg-laying chickens would be kind of a cool thing. So they bought everything up, and for a number of years nothing much changed. In the early 1970s, Harco, or Arbor Acres, moved to Connecticut, and everybody had the option of moving down there with them. And as far as I know, none of the people that we knew went with them. Everybody stayed here in the Easton area, and thanks to people like Eddie Rogers, everybody found good, decent work. I guess the only person who didn't do too well was Inky Williams, because I ended up taking his daughter to the prom, which was, you know, probably not the high point of her life. But other than that, we were fine. And after 1986, Arbor Acres got out of the egg business and went into the laying business. And one of the reasons for that, and I do want to address this, is that I feel, and I'm sure my dad would have too, my dad would never eat veal because he felt that baby cows were inhumanely treated. Currently, the way the egg business works is little Miss Chicken is put into a cage, and she's stuck there for the rest of her life. The chickens at Harco had plenty of room to walk around. Yeah, they were walking in chicken poop, but hey, they're chickens. Some of the older ones got to walk around outside and have kind of a real cool life. But today, chickens are in batteries, you know, cage upon cage upon cage. After that first year, many chickens are starved and dehydrated so that they will lose all their feathers and then given food again, when the feathers come back, they start laying eggs again. So you can get 2 or 3 years worth of chicken eggs out of a single sad-looking chicken. And then this is only in the egg business. You know, the broilers are now sent off to slaughter when they're 6 weeks old. They don't have a lot of time to go to kindergarten.
Ed, is that what they mean by free-range chickens?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of definitions. There's cage-free.
Yeah.
Cage-free could be an indoor chicken that's just not an egg cage. Free-range is a chicken that has at least some place to work around. Now, my hen house, it comes from the Amish, and they're wonderful farmers. So they put in all sorts of things to make it very humane. And my girls seem to like it quite a bit. They're cage-free and they're free-range, but free-range means that the 3 chickens have an area that's like this to walk around in. And they're happy as clams most of the time. It doesn't, free-range, no, they're not out there running with the cattle. No, it's not like that.
Right.
Although there are places, I have seen, there's a thing called the Heifer Project. Has anybody ever heard of
Yes,
that?
I've been.
The Heifer Project's one of
Yeah.
the great things.
It is.
I'm a big donor. And Heifer used to have a farm in Rutland, Massachusetts, and they had really free-range chickens. They built this house on wheels that looked like a gypsy caravan house. That's where the chickens live, and they just put it out in the middle of the field, opened the door, and let them go.
Yeah.
And they ran around and had a great time. And chickens are smart enough to know, most of them are smart enough to know, that, it's getting dark, I'll go inside, and then we would just close it up at night. And it was a wonderful life for chickens. Most chicken farms are not like that. Questions? I'm done. Thank you.
How'd you keep the foxes away and all those people?
Well, I'll give you one example. The roosters that we saved, genetic roosters, were kept in a separate house outside. And one night, my dad heard something, so he took my baseball bat and went out there and found out that there was a family of raccoons that were attacking the rooster, and he just used the old Louisville slugger. Took care of them that way. Now, I've lost chickens just this past year. I had probably a raccoon come in and take 2 of my chickens. They were really nice chickens, but they weren't working. They weren't laying any eggs, but they were pretty. So I was sad to see them go. But the fox or the raccoon or whatever opened up the back of the cage, just pulled them off the roost and disappeared. It's hard. Here at Easton, the other problem that we have with free-range chickens are hawks. Hawks are very, their eyes are bigger than their ability to carry chickens off, but they will oftentimes attack them. Yes.
And I thought at one point there was a law on the books that you couldn't own a rooster in Easton?
Yeah, we had lots of laws like that, but to the best of my knowledge, that's not true anymore. I went to every single neighbor and said, please tell me if this is bothering you, because it was bothering the hell out of me. But in for a dime and for a dollar, he's sort of a pet. He was miserable. They will tell you that barred rocks are just revenue chickens. And this rooster would wait till I'd walk by and then sneak up and back at me. Now, roosters, like velociraptors, have a spur. And they will jump up and hit you with the spur. And people have actually been killed by roosters because they could put a hole in your femoral artery.
Oh my goodness.
For the most part, the cold hardy breeds aren't quite that crazy. We had a breed called Andalusians down at Sheep Pasture. Incredibly beautiful birds. They're blue, and they're a beautiful pale shaded blue. Very interesting genetics. 2 out of every 4 birds are blue. One is white and one is black, because blue doesn't breed true in chickens. But they were just the same. Even the hens would try to attack you. So it was, yeah.
Can you describe describe your typical day as the son of a chicken and duck farmer? What were your responsibilities, et cetera?
Well, when we were here in Easton, when I was a little kid, we were still in Braintree in my dad's community. And so I didn't see my dad very much because he had that 54-hour week. And my grandfather was a guy who took me to baseball games and stuff like that. When we came out to Easton, I was 12, so I got involved in the average day. And we had other animals, so I took care of, as a typical 12-year-old. I did as little as possible, I'll be honest. But it was my job to go around at night, and make sure the chickens were safe. We'd go through the big high-rise chicken house. As you may have mentioned, it did not smell very good. There's a lot of ammonia in chicken stuff. But we went through and checked to make sure the birds were off the nest and on the roost. So it was evening work. During the day, my dad was down at the main farm, so I would go and talk to Johnny Leggett, who was the man who was in charge of our farm. And he was the person in charge of feeding and watering, and I'd help a little bit there. We had a dairy farm next door and a dairy farm up the street, so I messed around a little bit with my friend's dairy operation, their dad's dairy operation. That was Tony Gomes, who was on the fire department for many years. He was his dad was a dairy farmer, and I spent probably as much time at the barns with the dairy cows as I did with the things. I do want to mention another interesting part of my dad, because he was really good at arranging marriages for chickens. And so it turns out that people who had racehorses here heard about him and asked him to arrange marriages for racehorses. It's the same genetics. So I spent a lot of time around racetracks, and I do want to say that just this last Saturday, I picked the winner of the Preakness, and the horse that finished second. And that's because when I was a little kid like this, my dad had me hot walking horses. And I actually rode a horse that was an army horse, a cavalry horse, because there were more horses involved in World War II than in even the Civil War, because they were used for a variety of things. But I rode a cavalry horse, Pat, and it was great. Growing up around animals was a lot of fun. My dad trained our German Shepherd to help with the chickens, and so I helped a little bit with the training. We taught him taught her how to toss a ball to our horse. We had a pony, and Pat, the pony, our second Pat, would pick up the ball and throw it again, and they would just go back and forth between the dog and the pony. It was just a wonderful life. We had geese and ducks. And plenty of fresh air. It was just great. It's kind of a sad thing to see that's gone by the wayside. But I really do recommend having backyard chickens. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes a day to take care of your chickens. Unless you stop and talk to them. But it's a good lifestyle. The eggs are fresh. Most eggs you buy at the store are 3 weeks old. If you're not too squeamish about where the eggs come from, you want to hear about that? Sure. Let's gross them out. I do this when I take 4th graders around here. Well, let's visit the shovel shop. Oh, yeah. And over here, this is the sewage treatment plant all of Northeastern. The kids love that. So, chickens.
You didn't tell us anyway.
We're going to save you some money tonight, though, because you won't be able to eat it. So the one difference between a chicken and mammals is that chickens only have one way out the rear end. So the poop and the eggs come out the same way.
We really wanted to hear that.
But here's the thing about chickens.
We'll never eat it again.
No.
They have it all figured out, so they will not lay an egg that's dirty.
Oh.
Okay. So,
That's interesting.
so they're always clean, always clean.
Let's give a round of applause.
Yeah.
I have a chicken story. When, this is before my brother Freddie was born, he's 7 years younger than I. And my sister Carmen, a year younger. So we must have been 4 to 7 in age. And then later, also, my dad, he bought 100 chickens. And he built this big chicken coop. It's still standing on the property. It's like a small cottage. And the chickens would come, and then he had a chicken wire fence covering a huge yard, huge for them to walk around and all. Our job was to change the water, fill the grit, because they needed the grit, and then the grain. And I remember the first time I went in to collect eggs, one of those chickens pecked my finger, and I got scared. So my brave sister Karen became a nurse, who could, nurses, they're exposed to everything. She was great. She collected the eggs. But we had to clean up the yard too, from the coop. But our job was to be sure they were fed and watered and got their grit and collected the eggs. And my dad later said, well, I did that because I wanted to teach my children responsibility.
And 100 chickens is pretty responsible.
Yes, and then I remember that in the latter years, he bought 100 capons. We were talking about the capons, right? And they were getting bigger. And I had 2 pets. One was Nancy and the other was Beverly. And I remember my grandfather coming over and my father, my father, he was squirmish like me when we were gonna slaughter them. And anyway, so my father he had a baseball bat and he would hit the chicken on the head to numb it so it wouldn't know. And then my grandfather had a hatchet. And then there was a pot of hot water, put it in so that the feathers would come out. And my job as a 10-year-old was to pull all the feathers out and bring that chicken into the kitchen to my mother, and she would clean it out, and within a few minutes it'd be in the freezer. And so I remember that really, and I remember one chicken that got loose without a head running around.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, Bill, you're on.
So thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed.
We appreciate your wonderful stories, as always, and your presentation. Thank you so much. And for our viewing audience out there, remember that we have a Grange meeting third Monday of every month, except January and February. And we invite members to come and check us out. Come for a wonderful, delicious dinner at 6 o'clock, and an interesting program like tonight's program at 7. I'm Priscilla Almquist-Olsen, your host. I hope to see you here at our meetings. Until then, be well.
That's a great job, Ed.
It was fabulous.
Quite interesting. My mother got 12 chickens for us. We don't go to the eggs, so I can relate to this. But we didn't quite get into it.
I don't want you ordering chicken tenders tonight.
Well, we sold the eggs to the Morse family who lived across the street. It was a big deal.
Sure.
But it's hard. You have a tough attention span when you're 13 years old. So you never really absorb it. At least you're a family event. So great job, Priscilla. Thank you for making that happen. That was a big plug.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, thanks for making that happen.
Oh, you're welcome.
It was great. So, worthy Vice President, are the labors of the day complete?
They are, worthy President.
Because there's no more work for us today, I assume there's no more comments here. The steward will see that the implements are properly secured for the night, and the assistant stewards will close the Bible upon the altar. Brothers and sisters, as as we are again to separate and mingle with the world, let us not forget the principles of our order. Let's not forget the principles of our order. Let's add dignity to labor, and in our dealings with our fellow men, be honest, just, and fear not. We must avoid intemperance in eating, drinking, and language, and also in work and recreation. And whatever we do, strive to do well. Let us be quiet, peaceful citizens, feeding the hungry, helping the fatherless and the widows, and keeping ourselves unspotted from the world. Patrons, I'm about to close the Grange. Please assist with the salutation that signifies the good praises faith in God, which means you raise the right hand towards heaven, but elbow at the side. Nurtures hope, right hand lowered to the right angle to the waist. Dispenses charity, both hands clasped in front of the chest, and is noted for the fidelity, right hand on the heart as a pledging the flag. Left hand has dropped to the side.
I did well.
We're getting there, we're getting there. Thank you. Vice President, please declare the Grange closed.
By commands of the worthy president, I proclaim the Grange closed until lawfully open again, in faith, in hope, in charity, and with fidelity.
So be it.
So be it.
Everybody,
So be it.
So be it. May the divine master protect, guide, and bless us all now and forevermore. Amen.
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 Labors of the day are closed. Thank you, everybody.